Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Ben, and I love riding dual sport motorcycles off-road, which inevitably means I spend a lot of time in the backyard with the chickens cleaning up the bike from the previous adventure. And if you guys remember back to a time when I had the big green pig, my 2014 Gen 2 KLR 650, the way that the XR 650L looks now is essentially how the KLR always looked. I would wash that bike about once or twice a year. I, of course, always looked after the important components like the drive chain and sprockets, but as far as cleaning the bike up to make it look pretty, I figured that was kind of for the birds. I was more interested in riding machines rather than cleaning them up. But now that this YouTube dream has somehow turned into reality, I spend a lot more time getting both the XR and the DR HD ready, so you guys don't have to look at bug guts and mud while I'm working on these bikes in the garage. And apparently I've been doing at least a good enough job that one of you wanted to know what I've been doing to keep the bikes so clean, and the answer is relatively simple. Essentially, I wait for the bike to cool down a bit, and then I use this adjustable garden hose nozzle that I purchased off of Amazon to go through and knock off all the big debris. Of course, doing this a little bit sooner rather than later when everything's dried on is a little bit more effective, but it does a pretty good job on its own. Then I usually remember that I should have started with the underside of the fenders because there's a lot of debris there that gets knocked onto the lower parts of the bike. So then I go back through and clean that up, paying special attention to the chain and sprockets, making sure that I knock off as much debris as I possibly can. Right or wrong, I spray a bit down behind the front cover just to make sure that I flush that out, as well as the underside of the skid plate. Then I move on to the upper portion of the bike, again just sort of soaking everything down, hopefully knocking off a bit of debris, but mostly just getting it prepared for the next part, which is, again, extremely simple. I take my bare hand and, right or wrong, wipe down the bike, knocking off any of the debris that didn't come off during the first wash down. This basically just sort of disturbs it enough that the hose can then clean it off. The fork boots are always a bit of a hassle. They never really seem to come clean, and even if they look clean after a good wipe down, they usually end up drying with a good bit of debris left on them. And again, I'm doing this after the engine has had some time to cool down, so I'm not burning myself while I'm cleaning off the engine. I, of course, need to be extremely careful when I'm working around any areas that might have sharp edges, especially new ones that I put in on the last ride. Then I move down to the rims, again, just wiping things off as I go, going in between the spokes to clear those out. The rear wheel is a little bit harder to get at because of all the components that surround it, but I usually just go through and get as much as I can and then give the wheel a spin, cleaning up the bits that I missed the first time around in the same fashion. This also exposes a new part of the chain, so I go through and hose that down once again. After that, I go through and hose down the entire bike again, just to knock anything off that I missed. And while I used to just let the bike sit and drip dry in the sun for a bit before pulling it into the garage to wipe down the chain and re-lubricate it, I realized that there's a much faster way to clean the water off without having to respray the chain. And while I do end up getting a bit of a shower myself, the bike ends up looking much better when I'm done because I don't have all the hard water spots from the dried up water droplets. And like I said, the chain never really seems to need to be lubricated, at least not near as often as it used to be when I would wipe all the water off of it. And then up until just recently, my next step would have been to head right back to the woods to get the bike dirty all over again. But since my sponsor, Rocky Mountain ATV, came out with their first line products this season and sent me a nice big batch to test, I decided to grab the can of gloss coat and spray down the XR while leaving the DR uncoated so we could get a bit of a benchmark test to see just how well it worked. And on the instructions, it says essentially you have two different options. You can spray it down, let it sit a bit, and then buff it out for a factory showroom shine. Or for a mud resistant coating, you can just leave all the spray on the bike. And that was my plan until I realized that there wasn't going to be enough time for the coating to dry before we hit the trails, and assuming that it would do nothing other than attract the mud if it was still wet, I decided to quickly wipe the bike down with a cloth. And as somebody who doesn't usually put too much stock in this sort of thing, I've got to say the results were pretty impressive. Then I loaded the very shiny XR and the uncoated DR in the trailer, went and picked up my dad, and we headed north to the most beautiful section of trails that I have ever ridden, Harrison Hills ATV trails. And thankfully we showed up just after a rainstorm had moved through, so the trails were wet and the puddles were full. So we did our best to get the bikes nice and muddy. So now, of course, the best thing to do after a wet, messy ride like that is to wash the bikes off as soon as possible. But instead, I let them sit for over a week now. They're not super dirty, but there is definitely enough on here that I think there should be at least some good results that we can glean from this test. Again, the DR does not have any coating on it. The XR does. We'll wash this bike off first without touching it at all. I'm just gonna spray it down with a little bit of pressure from the nozzle that I've got on my hose. And we'll do the same thing with the XR and see how clean each of them come. This does seem like it's helped a bit already though. There's just not quite as much buildup as I think the DR has on it. As much as I really didn't think that this was something that would appeal to me that much, the sort of new bike shine that this provides really is kind of neat. It's a little bit slippery and definitely will kind of come off on your hands as you're moving the bike around, so definitely kind of something to keep in mind and to realize. I don't know if it's a reason not to use the product. I guess I haven't come to that realization or that conclusion yet, but it really does look kind of neat. So let's see if it helps us cleaning them off at all. So without the coating, obviously, we've got a little bit more work to do than just spraying it off. The moderately pressurized water does knock the big stuff off, which is, of course, a nice thing. But if you want the bike to actually look clean, at bare minimum, you have to come back through and sort of wipe it down with your hands or a cloth or something like that. I'm not really sure if the coating is going to make a huge difference on the XR, but just the little bit of sort of slippery coating that I felt already, and the fact that the bike does seem, well, just a little bit cleaner to start with, does sort of give me hope that this might actually be a really kind of nice feature. Because as easy it is to go through and just sort of knock it off, it really, I think, would be kind of nice to not have to do that, especially in the sort of harder to reach areas. So let's get some water on this and see what it looks like when I'm done. So I would say that the Honda looks mildly better. It seems like, again, initially it did help sort of shed the mud and water that landed on the bike. And of course, for optimal mud shedding abilities, we would have needed to spray the coating on fairly heavy and then let it sit and completely dry, which is of course not what I did, since I sort of hastily sprayed it on this bike right before I was supposed to take it out for a ride, and then had to wipe, well, the majority of the coating off, leaving just a thin film. I could definitely see where having a thicker coating on here would help, and I think I will do that in the future, probably with both of these bikes, because honestly, I do really like the way that this sort of shines the bikes up and really makes them look a lot nicer than new even, I think. So I'm excited to get that done and excited to get them coated, let them sit and dry, and then go out and test this again, maybe spraying them off sooner than a week after the ride. I think that would also help quite a bit. But for now though, before I can do that, I need to get both of these cleaned up. So I'm just gonna go through and do my usual cleaning routine, just going through and sort of wiping the dirt off, and we'll see if the coating on the XR makes any difference over the lack of coating on the DR. So the Suzuki, of course, cleaned up as usual. The XR, I've got to say, there are definitely some sort of weird differences that I noticed. Everything certainly came clean just fine, but it did almost seem like there were a few spots on the plastic where I could kind of tell that I think the dirt sort of got dried into the not yet dried coating that I had sprayed on a very hot, humid day, and then again didn't leave near enough time to dry, even though I did wipe it off. The metal parts though, like the tank, and especially the exhaust guard here, which I guess still seems like I didn't do a great job cleaning it up, did definitely seem like they came cleaner, a lot better. And I think that means a couple things. One, that it will substantially improve the sort of engine cleaning portion of this. I don't know that you're really supposed to spray it on a hot engine, or if the hot engine would cook the coating off or cook the coating in, make it better or worse. It definitely seems like with this piece especially, I sort of purposely sprayed this and then didn't really spray the rest of the engine. It seems like as hot as this thing probably gets, it doesn't really seem like it's affected anything other than the fact that, well, the dirt just kind of comes off a little bit easier. It seems like the dirt was just sort of on top of the coating. It just sort of cleanly wiped right off, and I definitely like that. And while the finish on the rims definitely always helps clean the dirt off, it does seem like the coating also did make a bit of a difference there. And as much as I wish that I didn't have to go in and physically knock that dirt and debris off, it does seem like if this coating was applied properly, then it would have probably made a bigger difference. Maybe not enough that I wouldn't have to go through and knock it off with my hands, but I'm kind of wondering if I spray this on heavy, actually let it dry, and then spray the bikes off immediately, if a lot of that stuff wouldn't have just gotten knocked off right away. I kind of think that it would have, so I'm going to test that. If you guys want to pick up any of the Tusk First Line products or anything else that I use in my videos, I'll put affiliate links down in the description of the video and pin a comment to the top of the comment section. If you guys use those links, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but it's a huge part of the income for this channel and one of the main reasons that I was able to turn this into my full-time career, so I definitely appreciate it when you guys take the time to click on those links, even if it's an Amazon link or something, before you make
a purchase, it really does make a big difference for me. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care, stay safe, stay swanky. Get out and enjoy this beautiful world that God created for us. Any chance you get, regardless of whether your bikes are clean or dirty, just get out and ride them. Take care, guys. We'll catch you next time. That was supposed to be a pretend trip, but it turned into a real one.